So for the last few videos, I've been putting the OM1 Mark II with the 90mm macro lens through its paces for indoor macro and outdoor macro. So now I'm going to show you how I set up the OM1 Mark II for macro photography. Customizing your camera settings is one of the ways that you can make your camera your own. Customize the buttons to what you like and what you feel is necessary for your photography. Now, as you go through this video and you watch how I set up my camera, there is no right or wrong way to do this. There's your way. So if you don't agree with anything I'm doing here, that's good. That's up to you. Assign a function to whatever button you want to assign it to. I'm just going to take you through how I've set up this camera, having the camera for several weeks. But with that being said, let's get into customizing the OM1 Mark II for macro photography. So when you first get the camera, it might be set with the auto mode. So the first thing we want to do is switch over to manual. Now, the reason that we want to customize our camera and our setup and save it as a custom mode is so that we can quickly switch between different modes. So for instance, on this camera, I have C1, which is my macro setting, and C4, which is my wildlife setting. So they're two completely different genres of photography using the same camera, and very quickly and easily you can just switch your custom modes to be able to switch between different genres of photography. And being able to customize this camera is a very big thing, because when I first started you couldn't do that, so you had to remember where the buttons were, whereas now we're able to map all the buttons on this camera to whatever mode or function we wish it to have. So what I'm going to do first of all is that I need you to get to know your camera gear. You need to know what ISO levels are acceptable, what f-stops are acceptable to you, and to do that you just run it through a series of photos adjusting your f-stops to see what is good. Now, I know for a fact that with the 90mm, f8 is a very good f-stop for stacking, and you can go up to around f14 before diffraction starts kicking in. Again, as I've stated before, you can go above f14, but just bear in mind you are going to have to put in a little bit of post sharpening to get it really sharp and to correct for the diffraction that is caused by a higher f-stop. Typically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this camera up for focus stacking. That's our primary function for this camera, and then what we want to do is use the same type of settings for single shot. So the first thing we're going to do is come to our shutter speed. Now, when we focus bracket on the OM1 Mark II, we have a limitation of 1/100th of a second. So I'm going to start out at 1/100th of a second. Then we're going to take our f-stop, and again, as I said before, f8 is a good f-stop for the macro with this setup. So what we have there is 1/100, f8, and then we have to deal with the ISO, which is currently at auto, and the native ISO for this camera is 200. So those are the base settings I would use on most shoots when we start. And again, I have got a flash, which is the V860 version 3 for Olympus. Most of the time I'm using flash. If I'm not going to be using flash, these settings will alter. These are the three main settings that will alter anyway. So you might want to put your f-stop up to get more depth of field, in which case you might need to increase your ISO, or you might need to decrease or increase your shutter speed. Those three will alter. So next we're going to come to white balance, which is important. It's always set to auto out the box, which is great for single shot, but if you're going to be stacking, we want to set it to a single white balance, and I'm just going to set it to flash, and it's set currently at 5500 Kelvin, and I'll just leave it on there. I am shooting in RAW, which we will set up in a minute, but we are going to leave it like that. We have the subject detect, which we're going to turn off, autofocus or manual focus. I'm going to switch that to manual focus, and then we shall map a button to change that setting. Most of the time I am in manual focus. Again, this setup has a focus clutch on it, which makes it quite useful for switching from manual to autofocus. We're going to set up a single, and whichever one you choose is up to you. I'm just going to choose single for this video. We have metering, so I'm just going to put on center weight metering. I kind of like that meter, and again, personal choice as to which one you want. Right, so we're going to go into the menu, and we're going to make sure RAW is selected for our format. Aspect ratio we don't need. Image preview, again, this is completely up to you if you want to see an image preview or not. I've currently got it turned off because I like to just get on with it. Sometimes if I'm in single shot I might turn it on so I don't have to keep chimping and looking at the back, but for this one I'm going to leave it turned off. Picture mode doesn't really matter, we're shooting in RAW. So I'll just leave it at natural. So auto white balance, keep warm color, I have that turned off. I don't want the camera doing anything to my raw file at all. Color space, Adobe RGB, that's just the workspace I like to shoot in. Upper limits, I don't need to set that. I'm not using auto ISO. If I'm doing birding, I would do that, and that's set to C4 on this, but we're not dealing with that in this video. Noise filter. Noise filter is what everyone would know as noise reduction. Again, I don't want the camera doing anything to my images, so I keep that off. Flicker scan's not needed. EV step is at 1.3. Metering, again, we've already done that. Most of these can be left alone. Yep, they're all okay. Right, drive mode is okay. Anti-flicker shooting, I've left that off. Sequential shooting settings. These are the different settings. So on the left-hand side here, if you put a tick box in there, they will show up on your quick menu when you press OK, and you're able to select them, and then you're able to select the frames per second. Now, for this particular setup, I'm just going to leave them at default. But if you find your flash can't keep up, then you can change your frames per second and drop it down. So for instance, we could go to 5, and the frame counter limit, we want to leave that off. The frame counter limit is how many frames you take before it stops taking images. I don't want that. I want as many images as I can. Anti-shock settings, don't really need any of that. Silent shooting settings, noise reduction again off. The noise, that's when you're taking a picture, I want that off. And you might need the AF illuminator on depending on your settings, so I'll select it to on. Flash mode and allow flash, because we want the flash to go off when we take a picture. Next, image stabilizer is SIS auto, leave it on auto. Image stabilizer on, handheld assist off, lens IS priority off. Alright, so high res shoot. So this, now most of this you leave as it is. Focus bracketing is here. I can't do the focus bracketing right now because I'm plugged in and I'm recording the EVF. We'll set up focus bracketing last. AF mode is manual again. AF plus manual, I'll leave that on. Okay, all that's okay. Subject detection is off. We don't need any of that. Eye detection frame off because we're not using any of those settings. Again, this is for macro. Now you have manual focus assist. So you've got magnify, peaking, focus indicator. You can turn these on and off as you wish, but we're going to assign buttons to turn these on and off, so I'll leave them off for now. Peaking settings, so this is your settings if you want peaking. Red, low and off is pretty good for my settings. Again, you can change that if you wish to. Preset distance doesn't matter. Manual focus clutch operative. Here we can change the focus ring as to which direction it goes, so you can change it from left to right, right to left. Again, that is all up to you. And reset lenses, when you turn off the camera, it resets your lens. I like to leave them off. Video now, so if you're out in the field, you want to get some quick video of your bugs, which I do a lot. Before we had this camera, we switched cameras and lenses, whereas now I'm able to do it all in one camera, which is very nice. So your video codec, you got H.264, H.265. I leave it H.265. And then I like to use 4K 60. You want a high frame rate when doing your insects, but at the same time I want good quality, so I'll keep it at 4K. Digital teleconverter is off. Picture modes, they're all okay. White balance, I'll leave it to auto. You can again change that, but for quick B-roll, I'll just leave it to auto. Keep warm color off. Again, I don't want the warm color. So these are your ISOs. I leave them as they are. I prefer to get the shot whether it's noisy or not. Image stabilizer is on. Sound record settings isn't really, I don't really use that. And we have zebras, so we can have these on. So what happens with these zebras, if you're overexposing your footage at a level of 80, whites will have zebras on it, so it tells you you're overexposing slightly. You can set this to anything you want to. I just leave it as the default because I'm quite used to using it at default. Playback operations is, I'll leave all those as they are. Button settings, okay, these are our button sections. So let's go in here and we're going to assign some button functions. So what I want to do here is this top button here, I want to assign that to focus bracketing. There. That is just there. Okay. Now, I'm going to come back and talk about that in a minute. That is our record, which is perfectly okay. We want to zoom in with that, not ISO. So I'm going to set that to magnify. So Again, focus bracketing on this button here. Then we have magnify at that button there. This one, we want it to be autofocus on or off. So by holding down the button, autofocus will be activated. So it's basically on, off. Most of these will leave the same. There's only a couple I change. So here, top button's already there. That's peaking. And then this bottom one, which is already set again, it's actually set, already set it, is your depth of field preview. Then we've got buttons for the grip, which we don't have. And then we have L function, which is the button on the lens. I'm going to set that also to focus bracket. And you might be wondering, why have I set 2 buttons to focus bracketing? I use this button or the clutch to activate focus bracket on the 90mm. However, I need to set a focus bracketing button on the camera in case I use the 60mm, which doesn't have one of these buttons. Okay, so that is why I've set 2 buttons. So that is pretty much how I have it all set up. Let me just check the rest of it. LV mode, which I can't change because the HDMI is plugged in. I will talk about that in a minute. So all the stuff I can't change because of this being plugged in, we'll talk about at the end. Okay. Night vision, I'll talk about that at the end. File names, edit file names and all that stuff. Lens info settings, you can put that on if you want. And of course, have your copyright info set. Mine is already set. So put your copyright info in there. That, which is the sound when you're focusing, it beeps, beep, beeps. Turn that shit off, it pisses people off. This one, airplane mode. Right, I turn airplane mode on. So if we just read that, it disables Wi-Fi and Bluetooth communication, forces termination even if communication is in progress. If you run round with your Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on, it's just going to drain your battery even more. I don't use any of those I'm out in the field, so I turn airplane mode on because it just cuts everything off. So you don't need to worry about it. Okay, so that is it for that. What I need to do now is unplug my EVF recording. Take a look at this janky setup I've had to rig up just so as I can show you the focus bracketing. So we're going to turn on focus bracketing, number of shots 999 because I want to be able to choose how many shots it takes. And with this camera, your bracketing starts when you press the shutter and it stops when you press it again. So if you were to set this to say 50, then you're going to be limited to only 50 shots, whereas at 999 I can carry on until the stack is finished and then press my button. Focus differential, again we're using the 90mm, which has 2 times macro. It gets very, very thin, the depth of field does, so we want that on 1, and charge time is 0. The focus bracketing, again, we can turn it on and off via this button here. So if we're using the 60mm lens, we can turn it on there. We could turn it on and off via the button on our lens. So if I'm like this, if I'm like that, I can press the button, turn it on and off. And also what I found out is if you leave it on focus brackets, I leave it on, right, when you go into your manual mode on your lens clutch, it will go into a single shot. So I'm able just to take a shot, bang, done. Let me put the flash on so you can see. With the focus clutch off, it's in single shot. Okay. And then if I want to go into bracketing, so let's say I'm photographing an insect here. I'll do a single shot, and then I can, if I want to focus bracket, engage the autofocus clutch, and then we can go straight into focus bracketing, which is very useful. So there's 3 different ways of being able to activate my focus bracketing depending on the situation that I find myself in. Let's go back into the EVF. So for EVF, I'm going to use SOVF. Live view is displayed like an optical viewfinder, reducing images as seen in the naked eye, standard. And again, you can choose between these, which is just which one you want. Night vision, if you find it's too dark, you can turn night vision on. And what night vision is essentially live view boost. So if you've got an older camera and you've got live view boost on it, that's what that is. It's going to increase the brightness of your screen so you can see what you're doing and focus. These are things that you can easily change if you want to. So the live view mode, you can map that to another button if you wish to. So you can map it to one of these buttons or one of these buttons, for instance. So you can just turn it on and off. I haven't done that yet because I find myself not switching too often. Right, the final step we want here is we don't want to be putting all these settings in every single time that we go out, or if I was to go to do wildlife, I'd have to change all my settings. We don't want to do that, so we're going to create a custom function just for these settings. I set my custom modes because I've started to venture into wildlife photography. So this is a good opportunity to talk about today's video sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, production and more. Skillshare can help take your career, skills, hobbies, passions or side hustles to the next level. I'm currently watching Wildlife Photography, how to take captivating animal portraits, and it's getting me ready for my outdoor adventures into wildlife photography. The first 500 people to join Skillshare using my link in the description below will receive 1 month of free premium. Now, let's get back to the video and learn how we can assign our custom functions to our camera. If we press our menu, and we're going to come back to the first menu, and we have one that's called Custom Mode. Click on there and you can see I've already set C1 and C4. I don't want to mess with those settings, so I'm going to use C2 for this example. Click on C2 and then we can assign C2, and what it does is set current shooting mode and settings to C2 and set. And that is now set to C2. So if you look at my settings here on screen, so that is my C2, that's macro. I'm going to go to C4, which is my wildlife. So you can see there instantly we've got Pro Capture SH2 for wildlife. We have a 1/1000th of a second on the shutter, auto ISO. Those are the settings I'm currently using for wildlife. And if I want to do macro, I'll just come back to C2 and it sets it all up for C2. So let's test those out. So the first thing I'm going to do is test our bracketing. So if you look here, see there, hopefully you can see there, it says focus bracket, so we can turn it off and on. That works great. Test the button on the lens. Again, that works great. And then the focus clutch. Great. Test the autofocus. That's not working. Okay, so let's go in here and find out why. And we're going to go with manual focus, and then we'll change the manual focus to, I need to turn off the bracketing. Change that to continuous autofocus. Now we'll turn the bracketing on. So on, off for the bracketing. And then we can turn the manual focus on and off. That's great. So let's take a look at this here. So I'm just going to get some in focus. So we have our focus peaking, so you can see there, that's on and off. That's using the buttons at the front. And then we have our depth of field preview. So if I just put up the f-stop, so you can see it better. So you can see our depth of field. That's our depth of field preview. We've got our autofocus all working. Focus bracketing is working brilliantly. Okay, now because we've altered something, because the autofocus wasn't working, we need to reassign C2 and assign. So now those settings that we've just changed, which was the autofocus here. I've made a mistake. See that? It's very easy to do it. Okay, let's come back. F8, custom mode, C2, assign, and we're done. Every button on this camera can be customized, so you don't have to follow what I've done. You don't have to have my exact settings. Use the settings that you are comfortable with, same as with the EVF. If you want a standard EVF, go with a standard EVF. Completely up to you. You can use live view or not. You can use different ISO settings. Again, it's completely up to you. Whatever makes you comfortable is the right settings for you. This is just how I've set up the camera, and again, I haven't had it too long, so I am still getting used to it and comfortable, and these settings can change from time to time. But I hope you found that useful. Let me know in the comments below what settings you use for your macro photography with the OM1 Mark II and the 90mm macro. But that's where I'm going to leave this video. Thank you for watching this video, and again, as always, I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for sticking to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, then please subscribe and click the like button. It really does help out the channel. I want to thank my Patreon supporters for their continued support in supporting me and this channel. If you're interested in joining Patreon, then check in the description below this video for a link to Patreon. If you want to continue watching my macro journey, then click one of the videos in front of you now.